Hi, welcome. I'm Ivory. This is Roz. And today's topic is Incubus and Succubus. This is by request, and so we're happy to provide this to you. Before we begin, hello to our listeners in Nostell, Norway. Thank you for tuning in. I see you. You must be telling each other because the numbers there keep growing. Thank you so much for supporting our podcast. We really appreciate it. This is a darker topic, but Roz and I both know demons are real. I mean, demons are a real thing. So incubus and succubus is a form of demon. I cannot say, and honestly, there's no research that's convinced me that incubus and succubus are necessarily a real thing, but they're demons. So I guess the answer is demons could take any form they want.
I'm pretty convinced they're real
You
based
are?
on client, yes, interface between clients. I've only had, over the years, one man who was being subject to that sort of demonic attack, but I have had about actually 5 women over the years, one recently within the last few years.
That is interesting. Well, hold those stories for a little because I don't want to forget for those who don't know what the world incubus and succubus are. We did say it's a demon, but if you've ever woken up in the middle of the night feeling as you're being crushed by a dark presence, you might have experienced it's called the incubus phenomenon, which is an attack by a male demon. And that word incubus is derived from a Latin word, incubus, which means nightmare, and incubare, which means to lie upon, weigh upon, brood. In modern psychological usage, the term's been applied to this type of nightmare that gives one the feeling of a heavy weight or oppression on the chest or stomach. Now, I have to say, I had those a lot at age 9, 10, and I've had a few in my adult life, that heavy oppression, and I was terrified. And I remember those vividly. I woke up and I still felt the weight. I could not move. So I know what they're talking about. But basically, an incubus is a demon in male form that seeks to have sexual relations with sleeping women. And the corresponding spirit in female form is called a succubus. So in medieval Europe, I don't know if you know this, Roz, in medieval Europe, when an incubus is supposed to result in the birth of witches, demons, and deformed human offspring. And the legendary magician Merlin was said to have been fathered by an incubus. I did not know that. So, yeah. Do you want to talk about some of these stories? I mean, I have a couple that I found. It's not my personal stories. It's not clients of mine, but do talk about what you can, Roz.
Well, in all of the situations where I was discussing this with people, and this is as a result of the fact that I do paranormal, quote unquote, work.
Mhm.
And as a result, sometimes people get referred to me. Sometimes people see that I've done that in the past on my website. And that is how these situations came to visit me, so to speak. But in the cases where the women were experiencing these attacks, there was no question that this was a very physical impression that they had, and that they were very consciously in a sexual attack. And I'm talking about specifically, they were experiencing the physical realities of those things. Now, in this day and age, people don't want to even possibly believe that any of this could really exist. But there are many frequencies and dimensions outside of the one we live in where there are entities. And I never doubt, mainly because of what I feel when I'm talking with these people and what I sense and what I am shown in, visionary form, that this has truly happened to people. And one of the people that I was working with, and I did a few years of work with her, she had many other types of attacks going on also. And she eventually, I did everything I could to assist her, but I finally told her I am not able to get the result that you want, which is that this leaves you alone and goes out of your energy field. So you're probably going to be better off to seek out another practitioner who does a different kind of work than I do. And I think that's the real I guess the real problem that we encounter sometimes is, we do the kind of work that we do. Our skills, energies, abilities fall in a frequency realm, and we're not always in that frequency to work with these types of demonic entities. So it can get a little shocking. I mean, I found the last couple of people that I was trying to help sort of shocking, and one of them experienced extreme sleep paralysis prior to these events happening. So they literally would feel that they were in a physical, actual relationship situation, a physical attack on them, and they would be unable to move. Prior to it happening, they would awaken, they would know it was coming. And I mean, that is really scary, really terrifying when you think about it. So I have a lot of compassion.
Did they see anything, or was it just the feelings that of being held down, motionless and violated?
They saw other things. There were things in their living area that were moved or removed. I mean, these were almost what I would practically describe as somewhat poltergeist types of events. But definitely there was a huge sexual attack going on. And that's really the only word you can use. And they never really saw anything.
It's so scary. And a lot of people in a situation like that, they would have no idea where to turn for help. I'm sure it's a real journey to come to you or somebody else who can deal with that at all, and listen to them and give them some advice of maybe where to turn next. Like, they probably just feel very alone for a long time.
To me, it's such a really shattering sensation that you have no way to forestall this. You feel it coming. You are being physically touched, having this experience, a sexual experience, and pretty shocking how difficult it is for people to get over this. And my heart really goes out to them. And, when you look back through history, throughout the course of history, it's not like this is something that has not occurred over thousands of years. So to me, that always makes me think, okay, so we're sitting here on our little world and our little culture, and we're just convinced that none of this exists. Hello? Where do
I
you?
think that's true for a lot of things, though. I mean, it's interesting
Yeah.
that in this day, and like the way things are in our country right now, let's start with our country, but it's not just our country. But there's a lot of people who toss around the words of the battle between light and dark, but they don't believe in demons or they don't believe in angels. It's like, oh my goodness, what do you think the light and the dark is? It's God, it's Satan, it's angels, it's demons. If you don't believe in these things, I think you leave yourself wide open to be very vulnerable to attack.
Pretty scary.
It is. Well, I'm sorry to hear that you're having people come to you who had that experience. That is really scary. And it's not just known as incubus and succubus. This parallels for this phenomenon exist in other countries. And in Zanzibar, if they have what's known as popo bawa, and generally preys on men and only in their own beds, very specifically their own beds. In the Chilo province of Chile, they call it a wretched little dwarf known as El Traco, woos young naive women and then seduces them. In Hungary, and I may be pronouncing this, a Lydirk incorrectly, is a demonic sexual predator that flies under the cover of darkness, and it will appear as a wispy apparition or a fiery light. So, it's interesting, like in all of these cultures, what they call their names for the succubus or incubus are often blamed for unwanted or unexpected pregnancies. So especially in unmarried women. So I think that, and sometimes that falls under like folklore, but it's used as a convenience, but it's not the same as what you may have heard of the old hag syndrome. Have you heard of that, Roz? That is
Haven't heard.
usually restricted to a feeling of great pressure on the chest and not a ghostly sexual encounter. So I guess what I had was old hag encounters. Hopefully I don't have any more. Another difference is that the old hag is mostly accompanied by a feeling of death, suffocation, and just trying to survive. You feel like you're just being smothered. So interesting, you mentioned something that really caught my attention, Roz, and you said the word sleep paralysis. And that goes hand in hand with reports of incubus and succubus attacks.
It does.
So yeah, there's no reason you're not physically restrained, yet you can't move at all. Like not even your head. I've had this happen, but it wasn't under demonic attack, but where you can't move your head. You can move your eyes. That's it. And you can breathe, but that's it. You cannot move at all. And that alone is a scary feeling to wake up to. And then, like you were saying, how you feel. We always talk about how you feel. So if you have this sensation and you feel like there's something dark, evil in the room with you, there likely is something dark and evil in the room with you. I would take that very seriously. It's also, this happens generally during REM sleep. This phenomenon during REM sleep, this paralysis. Ah, goodness. So there actually has been scientific studies in the psychiatric world about the incubus phenomenon, and they included nearly 1,800 people. They really did this study up. Usually they will do that many. And they did the study from various countries, including Canada, the United States, China, Japan, Italy, and Mexico. And what the researchers found that over 1 in 10 people, or 11% of the general population, will experience the incubus phenomenon in their lifetimes. And I don't know if they're saying just the pressure or the actual physical attack. So that means there's an 11% chance for any given individual to experience an incubus at least once in their lifetime. Wow, that's odds I don't want to have. How about you, Roz?
Yeah,
No,
I can pass on that.
Yeah, no, you can have mine. But in certain groups, the odds are higher. And this is not surprising among people with psychiatric disorders. And I don't think it's because they have a psychiatric disorder. I think it's because they're vulnerable.
Yes.
And demons attack people when they're vulnerable or vulnerable people. So I would say that it's because they have a psychiatric illness, and because maybe when I worked in a psychiatric hospital, there were a number of people there who were diagnosed as schizophrenic, had been in the state mental institution for a long period, were permanently in the seriously mentally ill program. And what I could tell from them, they were my clients, and what I could tell was they were traumatized because they had had encounters with the dark in one form or another. So I just wonder how many of these people actually had psychiatric illnesses. The other group is refugees and students. Now, refugees are under a lot of stress, to get here, to establish themselves, to stay here. makes them vulnerable. And students are under a lot of stress financially, trying to get through school, figuring out what they're going to do. So there, those three groups, the percentage is as high as 41% that it could happen to them. 41%.
Wow,
Yikes.
that's a
And
lot.
also, go ahead.
That's just a lot more than I would have expected.
I know. I read that. I'm like, oh my goodness, I have to share this. They also found people sleeping on their backs are more likely to experience the phenomenon. And I will say, when I have had this and I woke up, I was on my back. I don't generally sleep on my back, never did, but I would wake up on my back. So alcohol consumption and irregular sleeping patterns also make an incubus visit more probable. They don't really explain why, but it frequently gets dismissed as, oh, it's just a bad dream. But scientists have found that the incubus phenomenon can lead to additional problems to having this phenomenon: anxiety, difficulty sleeping because you're afraid, and even delusional disorders, a mental illness similar to schizophrenia, because it messes with you to go through experience you didn't know existed, you thought didn't, you felt helpless, you don't know when it's going to happen again, it was a violation, all those things, it's trauma, it causes PTSD, really.
Are you familiar with I've seen this app that you can put on your phone a couple of times when I've watched paranormal television, and it's some kind of an app that records spirit energy on the camera of your phone as kind of like a stick.
I've had that before. Yeah.
Have you? So one of the people that I was helping with this situation, I was completely unaware before that app existed. Because, the paranormal work I do is not like going out anymore and doing anything. Interestingly, this woman got that app, she put it on her phone, and she sent me video, and I was absolutely stunned at all the spirit activity going on in her where she was living.
Is this recent?
In the last 5 years.
All right, so I'm going to say something that may make you feel a little better and listeners feel better. Unless something new has come out that I'm completely unaware of and I'm always looking for it, there hasn't been a legitimate program like that for phones for a long time now. There used to be, we used it in paranormal investigations, and it was legitimate because we might be in a cemetery and you'd see a spirit, and it would show words on it that the spirit was saying, and it was directly related to like a gravestone that was nearby or our location. But then they started being random word generators and random image generators. And I tried a lot of them and didn't keep any of them because I know I didn't feel anything. And it's showing like a parade of spirits and beings, things coming through. So unless there's something new, and if there is, please leave it in the comments because I want to know. And I'm sure other people listening want to know. But most of those, just about everything I'm aware of right now that goes on a phone is entertainment only. Thank God.
Interesting.
So she probably doesn't have a parade.
I'd never seen that before until she brought it up. And then I started looking for it online, and I was pretty surprised to see the those videos and to see that they were using some other paranormal technologies to be able to hear, to be able to see other entities and movement and spirits and all that. So it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, it was fantastic when it was legitimate programs, and I'm hoping there is a new one out there because I'd like to get it because I still do that stuff. I do want to share with you a couple of real life encounters with Incubus Succubus that I found online. So these are not clients. I would not share clients' intimate details, but first one is about a man who was attacked by a succubus. It happened in 2012 in Bakersfield, California. And a young man had this encounter. After returning from school, he was tired and worn out, but still had plenty of homework to do. He worked late into the night and he finally collapsed into bed. He fell asleep instantly, but didn't sleep well. He dreamt that an evil being was in his home and was trying to get into his bedroom. And it finally broke in. And as soon as it did, this person was jolted awake with a ringing sound in his ears. And he felt the demon. And it was on the wall behind his head, holding this guy's limbs down. Oh, I just got chills. It had something in his ears, and his left ear began to vibrate violently, and the strange sensation spread to his right ear as well. He fought as best he could, but he couldn't break free from this thing, and he cursed at the being and tried to free his arm and his leg. The demon just laughed at him, and it was an eerie and horrific sound that wasn't deep or high pitched. The demon cried out, "Soon," and released the guy. This guy sat up rapidly, leaping out of the bed to turn on the lights. But when light flooded his bedroom, there was nothing in there out of the ordinary. But the dogs were acting abnormal. Dogs are very sensitive, so are most animals. They were barking, leaping at the door, and trying desperately to get in to their owner. He went to the bathroom, and when he looked at his reflection in the mirror, he was really startled. His eyes were bloodshot, and the whites of his eyes had gone completely red, and he realized he'd been visited by a succubus demon. He remains terrified of that demon returning, but hasn't had another incident. What's remarkable is he survived the encounter. Supposedly, most people who encounter a succubus don't live to tell the tale, but clearly some do, because there's coming to see Roz. So is the succubus real? You know, there's evidence is hard to come by. I'm glad, Roz, that you've had these experiences with some clients, because that lends some validity to the fact that this is real. There's plenty of stories. There's another one. It's called The Ghost in the Abandoned House. It all started at a time in his life when he had started watching shows about ghost hunting and was very much obsessed with the subject. He met an older lady on a website for paranormal activities, and they became friends. This lady claimed she had several ghosts on her property and even saw and talked to them. He even heard a ghostly voice on her phone. No one could have duplicated that voice. It was such a faint, off in the distance kind of sound. He really enjoyed her company, so he planned to go stay at her house for a visit. After he arrived at her home, his friend took him to an old house next to hers that had been abandoned for a long time. She took him inside the house to have an experience, and he did. This woman told him that the ghost was of a man who killed his neighbor's children and who was supposedly still living in that small house. He could tell the spirit did not like this guy, judging him for his past sins. And when he got angry with the ghost, a computer tower flew into the back of his leg. The guy's friend was in front of him when it happened. There's no way she could have done it. He really started to believe his friend when he got a few pictures through an air vent, and something told him to look down, like he was taking pictures through an air vent. Let me be clear. And when he looked down, he heard like an inner voice, "Look down." He took pictures of the man's face, and they were scary looking pictures. For the next couple of days, he felt amused by these ghostly adventures and just enjoyed being with his new friend, but he had no idea what lay in store, because on day 3 of his visit, he was lying in bed trying to sleep, and he felt the sensation in his private area, and he said that it felt really good, and it kept feeling good. He had no idea what was going on, but he found out the next day when he told his friend what had happened. She explained that her house was haunted by a ghost, a soldier that died on her property in the French and Indian War. She also told him her son-in-law had been attacked by a female ghost, which is why he first started researching the subject of sex and ghosts. Throughout his stay, this ghost was communicating with him, and his friend recorded it speaking. He would ask questions to try to get it on the recorder, and they caught him on tape twice. When they listened really carefully, they could hear a voice on the tape saying, "I love you." In the room he stayed in before he went to bed, he also heard the supposed spirit say he loved him. But was it a ghost or a demon? Sometimes if it's unexplained, people just automatically label it ghost. But this guy, at that time, he thought it was a ghost because that's what his friend said. But now he thinks it was a demon. And I do too, like tuning into that. It feels dark. It doesn't feel like a ghostly presence. It feels more demonic. So maybe we're writing off too many things as ghostly encounters. Anything you want to say, Roz, here? I don't want to just like blither.
I think the one thing that always makes itself obvious to me is that even though we hear, that, oh, this is your imagination, this isn't real, we have to go with what we're getting. We
Yes,
have to
we
go
do.
with our gut and what we feel and what we sense and maybe see. And that's really important because no one else was there. No one experienced this but you. And when something is part of your imagination and there is reality there. So just go with it. You experience this, be straightforward about it. There's always going to be someone who disagrees with you, but what can you do with that?
We've talked about it before. There's so many people who, if they haven't experienced something, it doesn't exist. So
right.
you can't rely on people who don't know what you're talking about. You got to find somebody who's been there or is open to hearing about it, believes these things exist, so you don't feel like you're beating your head against a wall or just make yourself feel crazy because nobody else has experienced it around you. Well, there are
Exactly.
people. You can come to Rise. There are movies that cover this theme of the incubus, succubus, and one that covered an incubus, that the whole movie is about this. I remember it vividly. It scared me so bad. It was called The Entity. Did you ever see that movie, Roz?
I
The whole
didn't.
thing is about this. It's really well done. There's a book about it too. You can get the book. And another one that has succubus in it, multiple succubus, is Bram Stoker's Dracula. There's actually a whole list, and I'll tell you what, I'll put this list on our Patreon page with the extension of this show topic so you can see it, because there's probably 15 movies you could look at to get a better idea of what this is about. And some of it's really done well, that it's especially the entity, I think, where that is like really spot on for the real experience. Definitely join us on our Patreon page. We're going to be extending this conversation over there. You can always join free for 7 days. Check it out, see if you find it valuable to you. And join us next week on Friday. Our topic is the truth about deja vu. I got to tell you, Russ, since we decided on that topic, I've had so much deja vu happening to me. It's so odd. Like, oh my gosh, or just like underscoring that we need to cover this topic.
That's good. And I think people are going to be fascinated.
I think so too. So thank you for joining us today. We always like sharing information with you. Obviously, we're open to suggestions about topics. Let us know what you'd like us to cover. We've been doing this for, gosh, I don't know, over 8 years now, not all on different platforms. It gets hard to come up with topics. So we appreciate your help with that. And I'm sure there's things we've never covered, like today's topic, that we'll be happy to cover for you. So in the meantime, we hope you have an enlightening day.